Mister, I am hungry.
Why are you here all alone?
I just want a little food.
In a glass-walled Austin cafe, Julian Hart, a tired tech CEO who could be any quiet neighbor with worries he cannot code away, hears a boy whisper, "Thanks for a dented energy bar pulled from the trash." 3 small brothers wait in the alley. Julian offers a silk handkerchief. The boy sets the bar on it like treasure. Mercy grips him. If it were you tonight, would you walk past or stay? Morning in Austin carried a bright hush as the city warmed up, and Julian Hart was already moving inside it, an easy pace along the boardwalk, breath even. He liked repetition, the clean line from start to finish, the promise that effort becomes output. Code worked that way. People, not so much. On the jog back, he replied to 3 messages with single sentences and archived 20 more without opening them. His loft was a rectangle of light and intention. Concrete floors, white walls, a standing desk with twin monitors, one framed star map above the couch. No photographs. In the top drawer, folded in tissue, a silk handkerchief the color of rain. He lifted it, smoothed a corner, and slipped it into his hoodie pocket before he could talk himself out of it. He had promised to stop carrying it. Promises were easier to write than to keep. Shower, coffee, a protein bowl he barely tasted. His phone lit. Elena Park, his CFO. "Be present for the 11 o'clock, she wrote. "City contract, $50 million. No tangents. He thumbed back, understood. He woke the code he had left humming at midnight. Lines scrolled like weather. The model they were training would route surplus food from cafes and grocers to community centers, timing pickups with traffic and fridge capacity. Elegant. Clean. It did not need him to be kind, only precise. He told himself that was enough. He set his glasses on the bridge of his nose, then polished the lenses with the silk handkerchief by reflex. "Mia," he said, and his assistant's face blinked onto a corner screen, hair in a bun, a mug near her mouth. "Move the investor debrief to Thursday. Send the revised ethics framework to legal." "You got it," she said. "Sleep last night?" "I slept," he said, the answer thin. "That's not a yes," she teased. "The cafe is confirmed. Glass walls, solid bandwidth, corner table reserved." "Always," he said. "I'll walk." When the screen dimmed, he saw his reflection in the black glass. Hazel eyes. Dark hair that refused to stay tidy. A face younger in stillness than in motion. He thought of a birthday text he had not answered, an apology draft to a friend he had let down. He opened the draft, read 2 lines, then closed it again. He was better at building systems than repairing them. He checked the time, slipped buds into his pocket, and slid the handkerchief deeper into the hoodie as if it might fall out and disappear. The elevator sighed to the lobby. Outside, heat pressed against the skin. He cut through streets he knew by sound, past a bakery that refused to automate its kneading, a mural of bright hands, a storefront where a kid sat cross-legged building a small robot from a kit. For 3 steps, Julian watched the kid's tongue press to his teeth in concentration, felt something loosen and then hold again inside his chest. Family, he had learned, was a maze without exits. The company had asked for one kind of devotion, and he had given it. Anything devoured in return was the cost of building. He believed that on most days. On other days, belief wobbled, and he worked until it steadied. The cafe rose ahead like a glass lantern, full of morning faces and the soft thunder of espresso. He liked visibility, liked seeing what might interrupt him before it arrived. He rehearsed the meeting in his head. Profit, risk, delivery dates, a promise that would hold when examined. He pressed his palm against the door. On the far edge of the window, a small figure hovered, bare feet not quite finding shade. A boy studying the pastry case from outside like it was a difficult equation. Julian caught the image the way you catch a word you think you misheard. He stepped into the cool, bright noise of the room. The moment did not vanish. It waited, thin as breath against glass, for the day to turn and face it. The cafe buzzed with the kind of energy Julian trusted. Fast, purposeful, predictable. Laptops open, voices overlapping in low confidence. He slid into the corner booth, screens and figures already waiting for him. Elena's face appeared on the tablet propped in front of him, eyes sharp, hair tucked tight, voice brisk. "Julian, keep it steady. This contract's ours if you don't drift." "I won't," he said. The investors flickered into view, suits against a city skyline thousands of miles away. $50 million rested on tone, on clarity, on convincing them his vision would keep expanding like a tide. He spoke, precise, rehearsed, hazel eyes narrowing as numbers lined up like obedient soldiers. But then, out of the corner of his eye, movement. The boy again. 7, maybe 8. Shirt too large, hem dirty, small shoulders sloped. Bare feet pressed against sun-warmed concrete. He held his hands behind his back, lips moving, rehearsing courage. The boy stepped inside. The cafe manager blocked him, smile taut. "No shoes, no service. You can't be here." The boy's voice was a whisper, but Julian caught it. "Please, just something. Even the old food." The manager's head shook. "Out, now." Julian's throat tightened. He angled his screen, forced his attention back to the figures climbing in neat graphs. The investors leaned forward. Elena cleared her throat. "Focus," she warned under her breath, and he did. For the next 40 minutes he chased projections, justified algorithms, and painted futures bright enough to secure the deal. Every sentence snapped into place. When the call ended, Elena's smile was thin but victorious. "Signed," she said. "Congratulations." He should have felt relief. Instead, silence pressed into his ears, heavy as guilt. He packed his tablet, shouldered his hoodie, and walked out into Austin's glare. The glass door shut behind him, sealing the cafe's comfort away. He told himself it was none of his business, that he couldn't rescue every stray plea from the city's streets. Then he heard it. A voice carried softly from the alley, quiet but clear, like prayer. "Thank you, God, for this. Thank you for keeping us alive." Julian stopped. He followed the sound, steps slowing as the alley narrowed, concrete littered with cardboard and bent scooters. The boy was there, kneeling. In his hands, an energy bar, wrapper torn, dented from a compost bin. He held it like treasure, eyes lifted as if heaven were listening. Julian's chest burned. Logic told him to walk, but something older, quieter, made his feet stay rooted. The boy cradled the bar, lips trembling. "It's enough. Just enough." Julian shifted, gravel crunching beneath his sneakers. The boy startled, clutching the bar close. For a heartbeat, 2 worlds locked eyes. The CEO who spoke in millions, and the child who gave thanks for scraps. "Where did you find that?" Julian asked, voice lower than he meant. The boy blinked, cautious, then answered, "Trash, but God made it clean. It'll keep my brothers alive tonight." Julian's breath caught. Brothers. And the boy bowed his head again, whispering thanks for what no one else wanted. Julian Hart, the man who had ignored feelings for years, felt something break open inside him. The silk handkerchief in his pocket suddenly weighed more than his phone. More than his contracts, more than the world he thought he owned. The boy lifted the dented bar again, eyes shining with fragile faith. Julian couldn't turn away, not anymore. The alley smelled of oil and dust, a sharp contrast to the polished air of the cafe. Julian stood frozen, watching the boy cradle the dented energy bar with the reverence of someone who had never taken food for granted. The boy's lips moved again, a fragile whisper. "Please, let it be enough. Please keep my brothers safe." Julian stepped closer. "Brothers?" he asked softly. The boy flinched, instinctively shielding the bar. His eyes narrowed, assessing Julian as though danger wore a hoodie and clean shoes. "Yes," the boy said finally, voice small but steady. "Micah and Theo. They're waiting. Julian's throat tightened. He crouched so his hazel eyes met the boys. How old are they? Micah is 5. He doesn't like loud noises. Theo's 2. He still cries at night. Julian's chest tightened again. He pictured them, tiny figures, hidden somewhere in the sprawl of this alley. Where are they now? The boy hesitated. Then, with a glance that seemed too old for 7 years, he jerked his chin toward a pile of discarded e-scooters stacked crooked near the wall. Julian followed, careful not to startle. The scooters leaned together like broken ribs, and between them small shapes shifted. A child's face peeked out, pale, wide-eyed, cheeks streaked. Another tiny body stirred beside him, barely more than a toddler, hair matted, thumb in his mouth. Julian swallowed hard. The boy stepped forward, shielding them instinctively. "I'm Noah," he said. "I eat first. If it's bad, I won't let them touch it. That's my job." Julian stared at the bar in Noah's hand. Dented. Probably expired. He thought of his morning protein bowl, tossed half full into his sink without a second thought. "You test for poison," Julian repeated quietly. Noah nodded. "That's what Mom used to do, before." His voice cracked on the word. Julian felt the world tilt. A boardroom could argue over margins, but here a child guarded life itself with scraps and ritual. Micah whimpered, covering his ears as a truck roared past on the street. Noah soothed him quickly, whispering, "It's okay. I got it. I'll eat first." Theo toddled forward clumsily, his bare feet blackened by pavement. He pressed against Noah's leg, reaching for the bar, but Noah held it back, shaking his head. "Wait. I have to make sure." Julian's heart hammered. This was survival written in children's hands. He crouched lower, pulling the silk handkerchief from his hoodie. For years, it had been a keepsake he never named, a token folded in silence. Now he spread it across his palm. "Here," he said gently. "If you need to place it somewhere clean, use this." Noah's eyes flicked to the handkerchief, then to Julian. Distrust battled with desperate need. Finally, Noah placed the bar on the silk square like it was an altar. Julian steadied his voice. "How long have you been out here?" "Since the shelter tried to take Micah and Theo away," Noah said, arms tightening around the toddler. "They said we couldn't stay together, so I took them. We stay hidden. We're safer this way." The words hit Julian harder than any shareholder accusation ever had. A boy choosing alleys over shelter just to keep family unbroken. Julian pressed his hand against the wall, grounding himself. The silk handkerchief fluttered in his other hand beneath the weight of the dented bar. He had come to this cafe to secure millions. He had walked into an alley and found 3 fragile lives balanced on a prayer. And in that moment, the question gnawed. What mattered more, another deal, or the chance to keep 3 brothers alive together? Julian stayed kneeling, the handkerchief trembling slightly in his hand as Noah watched him like a hawk. Micah huddled deeper among the scooters, rocking back and forth, while Theo toddled forward again, tugging at his brother's sleeve. The dented energy bar lay between them on the silk cloth, fragile as a truce. "You don't have to eat it first," Julian said softly. Noah shook his head fiercely. "I have to. If only one of us gets sick, it should be me. I'm the oldest. That's the rule." Julian's breath caught. He wanted to argue, to tell this child that no 7-year-old should carry laws heavier than his own body. But the words tangled in his throat. He could see Noah's resolve was not born from pride but necessity. Theo whimpered, reaching out again. Noah pressed the bar closer to his own chest. "Just wait, Theo. Please." Julian's mind spun with the cold efficiency of his CEO life. He calculated calories, shelter options, risks. But none of it mattered compared to the sight of Micah flinching at the rumble of a passing motorcycle, covering his ears, whispering something too faint to catch. Julian lowered his voice. "What if I told you I can get you real food? Safe food. Tonight." Noah's eyes narrowed. "People promise that. Then they take us away." Julian blinked. "Who tried?" "The shelter." Noah answered quickly, as if memorized. They said we'd go to different houses. Micah screams if I'm not there. Theo can't sleep without me, so I ran. Julian's chest tightened, the words lodging like stones. He thought of contracts broken, of colleagues left stranded when he'd chased another idea. He had chosen ambition over loyalty before, but now loyalty sat in front of him, ragged and barefoot, asking to be believed. "Listen," Julian said carefully, "I'm not here to take you away. I don't want you to starve." Noah's gaze searched his, suspicious, as if scanning for hidden code. Theo fussed again, and Noah crouched, breaking a small corner from the energy bar. He hesitated, then lifted it to his lips. His little jaw clenched as he chewed, waiting, as though bracing for poison. Seconds dragged. Julian watched, heart pounding. He had defended patents, pitched to senators, faced down the media, but he had never felt stakes as crushing as this moment. Noah swallowed, paused, then nodded slowly. "It's okay. Safe." Theo lunged, tiny hand outstretched. Noah placed another piece in his palm, then passed some to Micah, who accepted with wary eyes. Only then did Noah finish his share. Julian exhaled shakily. Relief flooded him, but shame pressed harder. Children should not test for poison with their own mouths. "Where do you sleep?" Julian asked gently. Noah straightened, shoulders squared. "Here, or other alleys. We move a lot. Less chance someone finds us." Julian's gut twisted. "And no one helps?" "Sometimes," Noah admitted. "People give change, but most don't see us, or they look away." Julian's face burned. He had looked away just an hour ago. He had chosen numbers over need. The silk handkerchief glimmered faintly in the fading light. Theo reached for it, tiny fingers brushing the fabric, and Julian let him hold the edge. The toddler's eyes lit up at the softness. Julian whispered, almost to himself, "You shouldn't have to fight like this." Noah caught the words. His expression softened just slightly, suspicion thinning into the faintest flicker of hope. And in that moment, Julian realized this wasn't just a chance encounter. It was a choice. Julian sat back on his heels, watching the three boys huddled together like fragile branches clinging against a storm. Noah guarded them with a stare too sharp for his years. Micah chewed quietly, eyes darting at every sound. Theo tugged the silk handkerchief and giggled softly, the sound startling in its innocence against the rough alley. Julian cleared his throat. "Where are your parents?" The question dropped heavy. Noah's eyes flickered down, then away. His voice was steady, but hollow. "They're gone. A car crash. Last year." Julian's breath hitched. He pictured the news clippings he had skimmed without care, the accidents that passed like data points in a feed. But this was no statistic. It was 3 small lives hiding in alleys because they refused to be torn apart. What about family? Grandparents? Uncles? Noah shook his head. "We had no one else. The shelter said we had to go to different homes. Micah cries if I'm gone. Theo doesn't eat unless I hold him. They don't understand." Julian pressed his hand against his thigh, grounding himself. His mind, so used to parsing algorithms and failure points, now calculated human fragility. 3 children had built their own survival code, and it was working, barely. "Who looks out for you?" he asked softly. "Me," Noah said simply, his jaw squared. "I watch. I keep them safe. If I have to beg, I beg. If I have to fight, I fight." The words pierced Julian deeper than any investor's accusation. He thought of his own life, how many times he had walked away from people who depended on him. He thought of the silk handkerchief he carried like a wound he never tended, the symbol of promises he once failed to keep. Noah's small shoulders trembled, but he held Julian's gaze. "If you're going to call them CPS or police, just say it now. Don't lie. We'll run before they take us." Julian inhaled sharply. "I'm not calling anyone. Not yet." "Not yet?" Noah's voice bristled. Julian steadied himself. "Because first, I need to understand how 3 kids fell through every crack in this city." The boy studied him for a long time, suspicion flickering like a shield. Finally, Noah nodded. "If you really want to know, follow me." He turned, leading his brothers toward the deeper stretch of the alley. Julian followed, each step heavier than the last. They stopped behind an abandoned warehouse. Noah pulled aside a bent panel of sheet metal, revealing a hollow space padded with cardboard, ragged blankets, and a small collection of scavenged toys. "This is home," Noah said flatly. "We move when people find us." Micah curled up in the corner, rocking gently, humming under his breath. Theo plopped down with a soft grunt, clutching the silk handkerchief like treasure. Julian crouched low, stunned by the order carved out of ruin. 3 lives stacked carefully, shielded by a child's willpower. "Do you sleep at night?" he asked quietly. Noah shook his head. "I stay awake. To listen. To make sure nobody comes." Julian's chest tightened. "You can't keep this up forever." The boy's chin lifted. "I have to." Julian looked at the dented energy bar wrapper on the handkerchief, at Theo's small hand smoothing the silk, at Micah's quiet rocking. He realized this wasn't about charity. It was about survival and trust. And if trust was the only currency left to them, Julian knew he would have to earn it. That night, long after he left the alley, Julian opened his phone and contacted someone he hadn't called in years, a private investigator. He would find out every truth behind these boys, every missing record, every failure that had left them here. For once, his empire of data would serve not investors, but children. The investigator's reply came before dawn, a single line that glowed against Julian's sleepless night. "I'll take the case. Send me what you know." Julian stared at the message, his loft silent around him. The boys' faces had followed him home. Noah's sharp defiance, Micah's wide, anxious eyes, Theo clutching the silk handkerchief as though it were a shield. He had built systems to solve hunger in theory, but these 3 children were not theory. They were here, in his city, surviving on scraps. He typed back. 3 boys. Parents dead in a crash. Shelter threatened separation. They've been hiding since. Need everything. Records, CPS files, foster placements, any living relatives. When he hit send, his chest tightened. He wasn't sure if he was crossing into something he couldn't control. Hours later, he returned to the alley with food. He stopped by a corner diner, ordered 3 breakfasts to go, and carried them in plain paper bags. When he crouched at the entrance of the warehouse, Noah emerged first, eyes narrowed. "You came back," Noah said flatly. "I said I would," Julian replied, setting the bags down. He unfolded the silk handkerchief, laid it on the ground, and placed the food neatly on it. Theo squealed, toddling forward. Micah followed, hesitating until Noah nodded. The smell of scrambled eggs and toast filled the dusty air. Noah reached for the food but paused, his hand hovering. Julian saw the conflict. Instinct to test it first, duty heavier than hunger. "It's safe," Julian said quietly. "I bought it myself. From the diner on 5th. Noah's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Julian hesitated. The truth felt too raw. "Because no child should eat from trash." Noah studied him, then slowly tore a piece from the toast, tasted it, waited, and finally nodded. Only then did he hand food to his brothers. Micah chewed carefully, eyes darting to Julian between bites. Theo grinned, smearing egg across his cheek, and laughed. For a moment, the warehouse felt less like ruin and more like shelter. When they were done, Julian spoke gently. "I want to help you, but I need to know the truth. Where did it all go wrong?" Noah's small hands balled into fists. "We told the shelter we had to stay together. They said rules are rules. We ran before they could split us." His voice shook, but he forced it steady. "It's better here than being torn apart." Julian felt the weight of it, heavier than any merger deal. You shouldn't have to choose between family and safety. Noah's eyes burned with tired fire. But we do. Julian reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and showed it to Noah. "I've asked someone to find out everything. Records, files, what the system missed. If it's true, I'll know soon. And then, no more hiding. Noah stiffened. What if they try to take us? Julian shook his head. I won't let them. Not unless we know you'll be safe. Together. Micah whispered suddenly, his voice fragile. Safe. The single word jolted Julian. He looked at the boy, saw him staring at the handkerchief, the food spread across it, and realized the boy understood more than his silence suggested. Julian drew a slow breath. He had built a career convincing people to believe in things they couldn't see yet. Networks, algorithms, futures. Now, for the first time, he had to convince 3 children that he would not vanish when the world pressed hardest. The investigator's report was coming, but until then, Julian knew he was bound by something greater than data. He had made a promise in his heart. They will not be split apart. The report arrived 2 nights later, thick with digital pages and a weight heavier than numbers. Julian scrolled slowly, the glow of his monitor washing the loft in pale light. Parents deceased in a collision on Highway 71. No living relatives located. Children placed in temporary foster care 3 months ago. 2 failed homes. Behavioral difficulties. Night terrors. Siblings cannot be accommodated together. CPS notes trailed off like half-finished sentences. Case marked for separation. Julian's chest tightened. Every line confirmed Noah's words. The system had given up on them. He closed the file and pressed his hands against his face. For the first time in years, doubt clawed through him. He could orchestrate billion-dollar contracts, command AI networks, but could he be father, mother, protector? He pictured the children asleep in their warehouse hollow, huddled against cold metal. His empire of code felt useless. He picked up the silk handkerchief from the desk, smoothing its edges. Once it had been a gift, now a weight. Could he really keep another promise when so many before had slipped away? The next morning, he returned. Noah was awake, crouched by the entrance, watchful. Micah rocked in rhythm with the hum of the street. Theo clutched the handkerchief Julian had left, tiny fingers refusing to let go. He came back again, Noah said warily. I'm not leaving, Julian answered. Noah's jaw tightened. People always leave, even when they say they won't. Julian sat cross-legged in the dirt, lowering himself to the boy's level. I read everything. Your parents, the shelters, the foster homes. They all failed you, but I won't. Noah's eyes narrowed. Why you? You don't even know us. Julian's throat burned. He searched for words that didn't sound like slogans. Because I know what it feels like to lose everyone you counted on, and because I can't let the 3 brothers face this world alone. Silence pressed between them. Micah whispered again, almost inaudible. Safe. Julian looked at him, then back at Noah. That's what I want to give you. A place where you don't have to test food for poison, where you don't have to hide. Noah's chin lifted stubbornly. What if you change your mind? Julian shook his head. I won't. You'll never be split apart. You eat together, always. The words hung in the air, heavier than any vow Julian had spoken in a boardroom. He felt their weight settle into him, reshaping the man who had once only chased contracts. Theo toddled closer, holding out the silk handkerchief as though offering it back. Julian smiled faintly and draped it over the boy's shoulders. That's yours now? To keep food safe. To remind you I'll keep my promise. Noah's eyes flickered, suspicion fighting with the faintest shimmer of belief. His hand trembled as he reached out, touching the cloth lightly. Julian's chest swelled with both fear and resolve. He had crossed the line. He wasn't just a CEO stepping into an alley. He was binding himself to 3 fragile lives, and deep down he knew there would be no turning back. Julian drove the boys to his loft the next evening, the first time his car held voices other than conference calls or podcasts. Theo babbled, pressing his hands against the window, while Micah hummed softly, headphones shielding him from the hum of traffic. Noah sat rigid in the back seat, arms folded, gaze darting at every passing light. "You don't have to be afraid," Julian said quietly. "I'm not afraid," Noah shot back. "I'm watching." "That's different." Julian glanced at him in the rearview mirror. The boy's face was too old for 7, lines of burden carved where childhood should have been. When they stepped into the loft, silence pressed down. White walls, glass edges, steel beams. Order without warmth. Noah's eyes scanned the space like a soldier entering enemy ground. "It doesn't look like a home," he muttered. Julian swallowed. He hadn't thought about it before. The loft was designed to impress investors, not children. "Maybe we can fix that," he offered. He set food on the counter: warm rice, roasted chicken, vegetables. Noah pulled his brothers close. Before they touched anything, he said firmly, "We eat together." Julian nodded. "Always." Theo climbed into a chair with effort. Micah hesitated until Julian handed him a pair of noise-canceling headphones he had ordered overnight. "These might help," Julian said. Micah slid them on, relief flooding his features as he reached for food without flinching. Noah studied Julian carefully. "Why are you doing this? What do you want?" Julian sat opposite him, voice steady. "Nothing. Just for you 3 to eat without fear." The meal passed slowly, broken by tentative laughter when Theo dropped a spoon, and Julian fumbled to catch it. Something in the room shifted. The faintest crack in Noah's armor. Afterward, Julian tucked Theo into a makeshift bed made from blankets on the couch. He handed Noah and Micah fresh clothes, soft cotton instead of ragged fabric. Micah curled on the rug, clutching a pillow, while Noah remained standing, arms crossed. "You don't trust me yet," Julian said gently. "I can't," Noah replied. "If only one of us can go, none of us will. That's the rule." Julian's chest tightened. He bent down, unfolded the silk handkerchief, and placed it on the coffee table. "Then let this be proof. I promised you'll stay together. This is your place now, your ground." Theo stirred in his sleep, toddled upright, and waddled toward the table. He placed a small crumb of bread onto the handkerchief, patting it with his tiny hand. His eyes met Julian's, wide and trusting. The moment cracked open the room. Noah's lips parted, disbelief flickering into something softer. "He trusts you," Noah whispered, almost to himself. Julian's throat burned. "And I won't break that trust." For the first time, Noah sank onto the couch beside his brothers, exhaustion overtaking suspicion. His head fell back against the cushion, eyes fluttering shut. Julian sat in the chair across, the silk handkerchief glowing faintly under lamplight, bearing the tiny crumb like a seal. And, for the first time in years, his loft felt less like a fortress of glass, and more like a home beginning. Julian woke to the sound of Theo's giggles, a sound that didn't belong to polished loft walls or humming servers. The toddler toddled around barefoot, the silk handkerchief tied loosely around his shoulders like a cape. Micah sat at the counter with a tablet Julian had pulled from storage, sketching with quiet intensity, and Noah stood by the window, arms folded, staring out at the skyline as if measuring escape routes. Julian rubbed his eyes. "Morning." Theo waved the handkerchief proudly. "Daddy! Cape!" The word froze Julian mid-step. He hadn't expected it. He swallowed hard. Noah snapped around, eyes blazing. "He's not your daddy!" The air tightened. Julian crouched low, voice steady. "He can call me whatever feels safe. That's all it means." Noah's glare didn't ease. "We don't need another person pretending." Julian met his gaze. "I'm not pretending, but I won't force you to trust me. That's yours to choose." Silence stretched, broken only by Theo's laugh as he stumbled into Julian's arms. The toddler buried his face against Julian's chest, the silk cape fluttering. Julian held him carefully, aware of Noah's watchful eyes. Later that day, while the boys rested, Julian's phone buzzed. Elena Park's voice sliced through the line. "Julian, have you lost your mind? Reporters are circling. Pictures of you with 3 kids. rumors about unstable behavior. Investors are nervous, the board's calling an emergency session. Julian clenched his jaw. These children are not a liability, Elena. They are if CPS gets involved, she snapped. You're not their guardian. This is reckless. Step back before it destroys everything. The call ended with a threat hanging in the air. Julian lowered the phone slowly, his chest heavy. He turned and found Noah standing there, having heard enough. They're going to take us, aren't they? The boy asked, his voice sharp with fear he refused to show. Julian knelt, heart pounding. No, not if I can stop it. That afternoon, a knock thundered on the loft door. 2 CPS workers stood in the hall, clipboards in hand, flanked by uniformed officers. We've received reports, one of them said. Concerns of improper guardianship. We'll need to place the children into temporary care until the matter is resolved. No, Julian said instantly. His voice, honed for boardrooms, carried steel. These boys stay with me. It isn't up to you, the worker replied. She stepped past him. Theo cried out, clutching the handkerchief. Micah covered his ears, rocking. Noah planted himself in front of them, fists tight. If only one of us can go, he shouted. None of us will. Julian's chest burned. He scooped Theo into his arms, placed a hand firmly on Micah's shoulder, and met Noah's fiery gaze. You're not alone. I'll fight this. But the workers moved quickly, separating the children, ignoring their screams. Theo dropped the silk handkerchief, its corner dragging across the floor as he reached desperately back for Julian. The loft door closed with a slam, leaving Julian standing in a silence deeper than he had ever known. His empire was intact on paper, but the only promise that mattered had been torn from his hands. He picked up the handkerchief, pressed it to his face, and whispered, I won't let this be the end. The loft felt cavernous without them. Julian paced the length of glass and steel like a ghost in his own home, the silk handkerchief clenched in his fist. It still held the faint warmth of Theo's tiny hands, the trace of crumbs pressed into its fibers. His company hummed on without him, emails pinging, algorithms cycling, but none of it mattered. His promise lay broken the moment the door slammed shut. That night, he sat alone at the long counter, untouched food spread before him. Every sound from the city below felt cruelly distant. He replayed the boys' faces, Theo's panic, Micah's rocking collapse, Noah's furious cry. If only one of us can go, none of us will. The words haunted him like a verdict. By morning, he made a decision. He called his attorney. File for emergency guardianship, Julian said. The attorney sighed. You're not a relative. Courts won't make this easy. CPS will argue you're unstable. Headlines are already questioning your judgment. Then I'll prove them wrong, Julian said sharply. Get me a hearing. I'll bring evidence, witnesses, whatever it takes. 2 days later, the courtroom smelled faintly of polish and old paper. Julian sat at the front, the silk handkerchief folded neatly in his pocket, his only anchor. Across from him, the CPS team stacked their files like weapons. Elena Park was nowhere to be seen. She had chosen to protect the company from reputational risk. When the children entered, escorted by a caseworker, Julian's chest seized. Noah's jaw was set like stone. Micah clutched his sketchbook, and Theo scanned the room, searching for him. Their eyes met, and Julian mouthed, I'm here. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes, called for testimony. CPS painted Julian as reckless, an executive with no parental experience, taking children without process, destabilizing a company in the process. These boys need structure, the lawyer argued, not the whims of a grieving CEO. Then it was Julian's turn. He rose slowly, smoothing the silk cloth between his fingers before tucking it away. His voice was steady but laced with raw truth. These boys aren't a whim. They're family. I found them praying over a dented energy bar pulled from the trash. I saw Noah test food for poison before feeding his brothers. I saw Micah's silence mistaken for defiance, Theo's trust dismissed as childishness. The system has failed them, twice. If you separate them now, you'll break what little safety they still believe in, and I cannot let that happen." The judge studied him, but her face gave nothing away. Then Noah stood. He hadn't been asked, but his small voice cut through the chamber. "He gave us nights without crying. That's more than anyone else ever did." Micah slid a sheet from his sketchbook, holding it up with trembling hands. One word, written in careful block letters: safe. Theo toddled forward, clutching the silk handkerchief he had somehow slipped into his pocket. He held it high, a tiny fist waving the cloth like a flag, then stumbled toward Julian and pressed it into his palm. The room hushed. Julian bent low, pressing the handkerchief to his chest. For the first time, he felt not like a CEO making a pitch, but a father making a vow. The judge exhaled, slow and heavy. "Temporary custody granted. Case to be reviewed in full." Relief slammed through him. He turned, gathering the boys close. Theo's small voice whispered into his collar, "Daddy." And this time, Julian didn't flinch. He let the word stay. The morning after the hearing, reporters camped outside Julian's building. Headlines swirled online: "Tech Genius" or "Unstable Guardian." Cameras clicked every time he carried groceries, microphones thrust at him with questions about impulse parenting. Inside the loft, life unfolded differently. Noah spread cereal boxes across the counter, inspecting expiration dates like a soldier on duty. "We don't eat anything old," he declared. Micah sat in the corner with headphones on, drawing lines that curved into quiet shapes. Theo ran in circles, silk handkerchief tied like a cape again, giggling at the echo of his own footsteps. Julian watched, heart full, but mind buzzing. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Board members furious about falling stock, investors panicked by rumors. He finally answered Elena's call. "You've jeopardized everything," Elena snapped. "The board wants you out. The guardianship fight is making headlines, and shareholders see instability." Julian tightened his grip on the phone. "If they see compassion as instability, then maybe I've built the wrong company." "Don't be naive," Elena shot back. "Your image is our currency. Lose that, and the company falls. Do you want to tank years of work over 3 kids who aren't even yours?" Julian's voice hardened. "They are mine, in every way that matters." He hung up, chest pounding. That evening, CPS arrived again, unannounced. 2 workers, clipboards ready, scanning the loft like inspectors. The boys stiffened. Theo clutched the silk handkerchief, hiding behind Julian's leg. Micah rocked gently, hands pressed against his ears. Noah stepped forward, defiance sparking. "We need to ensure conditions are suitable," one worker said. "Concerns have been raised about safety." Julian guided them through the loft. Beds made, kitchen stocked, headphones for Micah, toys scattered across the rug. Every detail screamed of effort, of a man learning fatherhood by instinct. Still, the workers scribbled notes, unmoved. When they turned to leave, Noah's voice cracked through the silence. "Please don't take us again." His hands balled into fists, eyes blazing. "If only one of us can go, none of us will. We stay together." The workers exchanged a glance, their expressions softening for just a moment. That night, when the loft finally quieted, Julian sat at his desk, staring at his company's financial charts sliding downward. His empire was wobbling, his reputation shredded. But when he turned, he saw the boys curled up safely, Theo sprawled across his chest, Micah humming softly in his headphones, Noah awake but calmer, keeping silent watch. Julian whispered into the dim room, "I've made promises before, broke too many, but this one I'll keep, no matter what it costs." He pressed the silk handkerchief against his heart, the dented energy bar wrapper tucked beside it in a drawer, a reminder of where it had begun. Tomorrow, he knew, the fight would grow harder. The company, the press, even CPS would test him. But tonight, for the first time, the loft wasn't just glass and steel. It was home. The courthouse was packed when Julian returned, this time flanked by attorneys and with the boys seated close. The weight of headlines hung in the air. Unfit CEO or unlikely father. Reporters jostled for quotes, their cameras flashing as if the children were exhibits. Inside, the judge adjusted her glasses, weariness etched deep. We are here to review guardianship status and allegations of instability regarding Mr. Hart. CPS attorneys pounced. They painted Julian as erratic, a man chasing emotional whims, destabilizing his billion-dollar firm for children who weren't his. Screens lit up with articles about falling stock prices, rumors of him collapsing during meetings, whispers about his judgment. Julian clenched his jaw, the silk handkerchief tucked tightly in his pocket. Theo's tiny fingerprint still faintly visible on one corner. He rose when called to testify. "These boys are not a whim," he said firmly. "I didn't choose them because of impulse. I chose them because when the system abandoned them, someone had to step in. They need permanence, not another failed promise. And if the price is my reputation, I'll pay it." Gasps murmured through the courtroom. Then the children were invited to speak. Noah walked slowly to the stand, standing straighter than his 7 years should allow. His voice was soft but steady. "We were alone. He gave us nights without crying. He said we'd never be split apart, and he hasn't lied." Micah followed, holding up a crumpled drawing from his sketchbook. A house with 4 figures inside. Beneath it, one word scrawled carefully in block letters. Safe. Theo toddled forward last, clutching the silk handkerchief. He clung to Julian's leg, then raised the cloth high with a small fist. His voice cracked with determination. "Daddy keeps us together." The judge's eyes softened, though her voice remained measured. "The court recognizes the bond that has been formed. Temporary custody remains with Mr. Hart, pending final review. Further, the court acknowledges Mr. Hart's contribution to addressing food insecurity in this city." That was when Julian unveiled what he had been building in the shadows of the storm, the Open Fridge Network. AI-driven smart fridges across Austin, stocked with surplus meals redistributed in real time. "No child should pray over trash," Julian said. "No brother should test food for poison. This is how we prevent the next Noah, the next Micah, the next Theo." Statistics flashed on the screen. Child hunger down 20% in 3 months of pilot testing. A murmur rippled through the room, shifting the tide. Julian stepped down, gathering the boys into his arms. For the first time, hope outweighed fear in their small faces. As they left the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Noah tightened his grip on Julian's hand. "Did we win?" Julian knelt, eye to eye. "We didn't win everything yet, but we're together, and that's enough for now." Theo tugged on the silk handkerchief and whispered, "Daddy." Julian closed his eyes, the word no longer foreign. It was the truest title he had ever earned. The adoption hearing came on a gray morning, rain misting against the courthouse steps. Julian guided the boys through the doors, his hand steady on Noah's shoulder, Micah tucked close at his side, Theo skipping ahead with the silk handkerchief knotted like a scarf. The building smelled of old wood and ink, but to them it felt like the place where futures were decided. Inside, the judge's voice was firm, but warmer than before. "Today, we consider final adoption." Julian's heart pounded as he rose. "Your Honor, I came into this by accident. I found 3 brothers thanking God for a dented energy bar from the trash. They could have been overlooked again. But they taught me something my company never did, that intelligence without compassion is empty. I am asking you to let me be theirs, permanently." Noah stepped forward. His voice shook, but he looked straight at the judge. "We were safe with him. We're still safe. And we want to stay." Micah slid a folded paper across the desk, a fresh drawing. 4 stick figures under a roof. Above them, in block letters, "Home." Theo clutched the silk handkerchief and toddled to Julian, climbing into his arms. His small voice piped clear in the hushed courtroom. "Daddy." The judge's eyes softened. "The court hereby finalizes the adoption. Mr. Hart, they are your sons. The gavel struck. Applause rose quietly from the back, from volunteers who had seen the open fridge network blossom. Tears blurred Julian's vision as Noah gripped his hand. Micah leaned into his side and Theo buried his face against his chest. That afternoon, in the heart of Austin, the first official smart fridge of the Open Fridge Network was unveiled. A sleek unit stood gleaming, stocked with fresh meals and energy bars donated by local cafes and stores. Journalists gathered, but Julian kept his focus on the boys. "Go ahead," he said softly. The three brothers stepped forward together. Noah placed a fresh, unopened energy bar inside, his hand trembling but proud. Micah tucked in an apple. Theo giggled, pressing a sandwich against the shelf before clapping his hands. Cameras flashed as Julian lifted them close. In their hands he saw the future he had once ignored. Not in stock charts or contracts, but in trust restored, hunger eased, promises kept. Later that night, back in the loft now filled with drawings taped to the walls and toys scattered across the floor, Julian found a folded paper waiting on his desk. A drawing of him, hoodie and all, with the words in shaky crayon letters, "Home is Daddy's hoodie." Julian sat down heavily, clutching it to his chest. For the first time in years, he felt complete. The empire he had built would live on, but this was the legacy that mattered. Years later, Austin's skyline glittered with glass towers. But Julian Hart's name was no longer spoken only in the language of markets and mergers. In schools, families spoke of the Open Fridge Network, now spread across the state. In parks, children wore shirts with a simple emblem, a silk square and a small bar of food, symbols of safety born from a prayer in an alley. Inside the loft, the space was unrecognizable. What had once been stark and cold now breathed with life. Crayon drawings wallpapered the refrigerator. A dented energy bar wrapper, carefully framed, hung above the couch. And, on the desk, folded neatly, lay the silk handkerchief, washed, preserved, but never hidden again. Noah, now taller, strode into the kitchen with his backpack slung across his shoulder. "I'm heading to the community center. The kids want help with homework." His voice carried the same steel he'd had as a boy, but softened by trust, finally rooted. Micah followed, quieter but steady, holding a laptop under his arm. "I finished coding that alert system. It'll flag when a fridge runs low." He looked up at his father, a quiet pride in his eyes. "It works." Theo, still the youngest but no longer toddling, burst into the room with laughter. He held up a hand-drawn flyer. Night Pantry Kids Club. Food, friends, family. "We're making more tomorrow. Everyone gets one." Julian leaned against the counter, hazel eyes warm. "You three did this. You turned scraps into hope." Noah shook his head. "You started it." Julian smiled faintly. "No, I just listened. You showed me what mattered." The room fell quiet for a moment, sunlight spilling across the floor. Julian reached for the handkerchief, brushing it gently. "I used to think intelligence was measured in lines of code. Now I know it's measured in compassion, in keeping promises, and never letting family slip through the cracks." Theo wrapped his arms around him, burying his face against the familiar hoodie. Micah stood closer, leaning in without words. Noah lingered, then placed his hand on Julian's shoulder with quiet strength. For the first time, Julian realized his legacy wasn't written in contracts or capital. It was written in full stomachs, in laughter echoing through once empty walls, in three brothers who had taught him that true genius wasn't about disruption, it was about devotion. And, as evening fell, he whispered into the hum of the city, a vow made new each day. "You'll never be split apart. You'll eat together, always." The silk handkerchief fluttered lightly on the desk, its work unfinished yet eternal, a reminder that compassion, once chosen, changes everything.